don't know what happened last time. Our stream just shut down in the middle of everything. So please text or send a message if it doesn't go through. So sorry about that. Daniel was just introducing himself. So I think you didn't get very far before the whole stream kind of crashed, Daniel.
Okay. All right.
Again.
Yeah. So I don't, I'm not like, I haven't formally studied these systems for personality type. I have done a lot of informal conversations with Susie over the last 10, 12 years or so, and absorbed a lot of this information through just our conversations and stuff. But I'm the extrovert in our marriage, and so I just enjoy being here where I can chat with everyone. And yeah, so I'm just looking forward to tonight and seeing what comes up.
Yeah, I'm really excited that you're here, Daniel. There's so few ESTPs representing type online, and so I'm really convinced him to do this. I'm a certified MBTI practitioner. I've been working in the field of type for over 15 years. My blog, psychologyjunkie.com, has been around for, I want to say, it's been around for a while. Let's just put it that way. It's been around for 12 years or so. So yeah, if you are watching, leave your type in the chat so that we can say hello. And I'm going to just double check because we've had a lot of tech issues. I just want to double check that it's actually streaming. Let's see. I just want to make sure. Actually, Daniel, I'm going to give that job to you. Can you check that it's actually streaming properly? You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. I just pulled up your YouTube. I don't see it on there.
Okay, let me see. If someone's watching this, they're probably like,
what is going on?
Okay, it's not streaming. So, wonder why. It should be streaming. Let's see. It says it's streaming. Can you comment and let people know that we're trying to figure it out?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello. So I'm checking again to see if this is working. It's showing. Let's see.
It's showing live now, at least on the on the app.
If you can hear us, if this is getting through, let us know. We're trying to make it work, but I'm not sure why it's not working. Let's see.
It looks like it may be actually live now.
It doesn't look like it to me. It's not. Nothing's. Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see. We'll keep talking. Well, hopefully it's streaming. If you've tried to join us today and you haven't, and you've just been getting a lot of error messages, we are so sorry. We are using a streaming software to get this on YouTube, but seem to be having a lot of issues in the process. So if you're watching and you can actually see this, please let us know. We will go ahead and I'm not seeing any text that anyone is actually able to hear us though. Let me see.
Kale Marshman says we're coming through for him at least.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, Kale.
It's working. It's working.
We are definitely having more issues this week than last week with the whole technical side of things. So I think it's an issue with the streaming service we're using. But all right. So I was just saying that I'm a certified MBTI practitioner, been doing this for 15 years. And without further ado, because I know you all have been waiting here for a little while, let's go ahead and jump right into the presentation on type and the specific childhood struggles that the 16 types grapple with a lot as children. You might have experienced these struggles as a child, and this stream will help you to understand some of the things you went through and why. A lot of times when we go through these struggles, we kind of just feel like we're weird as children, like there's something wrong with us. And then as we get to be adults, we're like, man, now I see that that was just kind of a strange event. And the hope is that we'll have more understanding for ourselves. And I hope this stream will help. If you're a parent, then of course this is hugely helpful because you might be able to understand some of the issues and points of view that your children have based on their personality types. So let me go ahead and pull up that presentation, and please let us know if there's any trouble with the stream again. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Hi, Lisa. Hi, V, Kale, Brittany, Kate. Thank you guys so much for being here. Doug, I hope we didn't lose too many people with all those issues we were having. All right. So we want you to be part of this journey with us. We want you to be part of the conversation. The reason that Daniel and I really wanted to do these live streams was because we wanted to feel like we wanted to revive some of the life and connection and community in the type world. Type is supposed to be used to help us understand each other better. It's supposed to be a way that we can connect with people, understand them, as well as connect with and understand ourselves better. And so I really wanted to find a way to bring us in the type community better, to connect us better, to help us have real conversations, ask questions that many people have been dealing with their whole lives. And so I want you to feel like you can be part of that conversation too. So please go ahead and leave any questions that come up as you're watching. We are very interested in your thoughts. You are part of this. So, and it also gives me a break as an introvert from monologuing too much. All right. So one of the reasons that children struggle, and specific to their personality type, is that many children face either attacks or limits on their dominant function, especially if they're in a family culture that has contrasting types. For example, if you are an ENFP child and you live in a family with SJ parents, you might feel like your extroverted intuition is more of a problem than a benefit. You might feel like there's something wrong with you. Like, why can't you be as dependable or detail-oriented as the people in your family? And this, at the same time, some of the insecurities that different people face growing up can stem from fallout associated with the inferior function. For example, if you are an ISTJ, you might struggle with change. You might struggle with unpredictability. And so a lot of the struggles that children face can stem from both the dominant function of the personality type and the inferior function of the personality type. Now, if you don't know about cognitive functions, I just want to say that's okay. You don't have to be an expert on that to be able to be part of this conversation and get something out of it. Thank you, Thomas, for letting us know that it's coming through okay. I really, really appreciate it. We were so nervous there for a little while. All right, so we're going to start with INFJs and INTJs. If you are an INFJ or INTJ and you're watching this, drop us a comment in the chat. We'd like to hear from you. I'm not going to read this whole block of text that I have up here. I just want to say that if you are one of these two types, then as a child, you really lived in the world of ideas and concepts. You were always trying to understand the deeper meaning of things. You probably felt kind of like an old soul trapped in a child's body. I've heard that from so many INFJs and INTJs. At the same time, as children, many of these types struggle with, because of inferior extroverted sensing, can struggle with feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the sensory world that we live in. A lot of noise, a lot of chaos can feel really overwhelming to them. And sometimes they can get so stuck in their head, in thoughts and ideas, that they lose touch with the physical world around them. So that's where some of those struggles can stem from for INFJs and INTJs. When it comes to their specific struggles that I've heard the most from these types, one is that they tend to get pretty misunderstood. there's not that many INFJs and INTJs out there. It's really the smallest group of types in the whole Myers-Briggs system are the NJ personality types. So often they find that their insights, the ideas they have, are kind of dismissed, or people see them as strange or odd. They tend to go through existential crises much earlier than other people do. A lot of kids aren't really thinking that far ahead yet. They're more in the moment, but for INFJs and INTJs, it's pretty normal for them to be grappling with things like death already at a pretty young age. And, I can speak for myself in that capacity too. As an INTJ, I remember very vividly thinking about death a lot as a child and really struggling to come to terms with that. And I spent a lot of time thinking about things like the afterlife, or, what happens after we die? What happens when our pets die? Huge questions. And it became a major focus of my life. And people would be like, you need to be a child. Stop thinking about these really serious, dark things.
Lighten up.
Yeah. Let's ask Daniel, as an ESTP, did you have an existential crisis early on?
I didn't know what existential was until I was like in my 20s. So no, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's a huge difference in focus. INFJs and INTJs, they're very much focused on the big picture, like why are we here? What's the meaning of life? What's going to happen in the long run? They tend to think forward a lot. So with that comes that existential crisis. At the same time, they can struggle with overstimulation. That can be a real problem. If you go to public school and you're around a bunch of kids and there's a lot of commotion and a lot of noise, that can feel extremely overwhelming to an INFJ or an INTJ. They do their best work when they can kind of shut out sensory stimulation and really focus on one idea or one problem or challenge or insight. But if there's a lot of distractions and commotion around them, it can feel like they can't quite get a handle on their own thoughts. And that's really frustrating when your dominant function is all about forming insights and thinking. They also can lose touch with their bodies. Sometimes they can get so lost in thoughts and ideas that they forget to eat, they forget to drink water, they forget to get enough sleep. I've spoken to so many INJs who encountered health issues because they forgot about their bodily needs in the process of being in their head. So there's a lot of loneliness that can happen, a lot of feeling that they can't really connect with other people. Many of these types feel extremely misunderstood. Kate, I know you said your husband had an existential crisis at 11. Yep. It happens pretty early for those INJs. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the specifics. We've been talking about INJs, but let's talk a little bit about INFJs as well as INTJs and some of the specific struggles they face having to do with that F or T preference. So INFJs often feel responsible for other people's well-being. So conflict hits especially hard. And this would go for all the feeling judging types. They tend to feel responsible for other people's feelings. It's hard for them to disconnect from the emotions of the people around them. INFJs tend to be sponges for other people's emotions. And because of that, if there's conflict in the home or conflict in a relationship, then that's going to be really hard on them, especially when they're young. Sometimes they get stuck in a role of parental role almost. People confide in them, parents confide in them too early, or they become like mini therapists, and that's really not appropriate necessarily for a young child. And I have a comment here from Doug. He says, I used to go for a walk to do my planning, and boss thought I was acting privileged. Why did I think I could go for a walk? If you are an INFJ or an INTJ, then going for a walk and just letting those ideas simmer can be one of the most important things you can do. That's when you can get some of your very best moments, your best insights. Another thing that can be a struggle for INFJs is struggling to say no. Many of them struggle to assert boundaries and to take care of themselves because they feel like they have to please other people. And then there's a question from Melissa. She says, what's the difference between INFJs and INFPs? I relate to both. So that could be a whole other live stream, I will say, but one of the primary differences that I will get into, I'll just mention quickly, INFJs are introverted intuitives. So they tend to get their best insights and ideas through like solo pondering. They're coming from within their own psyche. they tend to have a more singular focus. They tend to narrow down possibilities, looking for like the one big insight. INFPs have extroverted intuition. It's broader. It tends to play with multiple ideas at once, looking to expand its understanding. So where INFJs are always kind of trying to narrow down possibilities to get to one insight, INFPs build and build and build, trying to create a broader understanding of many different things at once. There's a lot more differences and a lot more to it than that, but I do want to give you just that much for now, and then I will probably do a live stream about that at some point, actually.
Be a good one.
And I've written an article about it too, so I can try to link that to you later. I need a breath. So Daniel, can you talk a little bit about some of the INTJ struggles? You've been married to me long enough. You should be able to.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the primary differences that you'll notice easily between an INFJ and an INTJ is that the INTJs, they have TE as their auxiliary function, and so that gives them more of a focus on their system of how they're doing things, right? So they're not going to be as in tune to other people's feelings and things that way, but they're going to be more like, how can I get the job done? And so a lot of times, like in her first point here, she says, blunt logical approach may be misconstrued as meanness. What it really is it's their TE just trying to get the job done. So they're not worrying about people's feelings or emotions. They're just trying to accomplish their task, right? To get it done and just do it in the most logical way possible. So
oh, sorry. I was just going to say that for INT, so every type has a caring function. So everyone shows they care in different ways. For INTJs, the way that they show they care is through extroverted thinking, which is all about how can I organize and structure my environment to achieve a goal in the most expedient way? Or how can I troubleshoot or provide logical advice? And sometimes that just doesn't look like sensitivity. It doesn't look as kind or empathic as some of those feeling functions do. So yes, many times INTJs are just kind of seen as being insensitive, arrogant, or mean when they're really not trying to be, as you were saying. I didn't need to like jump in there and interrupt you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. As you get to know an INTJ, you will see that they're very willing to put their time and energy into explaining to you the best way for you to solve your own problems. And that's how they show that they care. And that's one way, I should say. That's not the entire, but that is one way that they'll show their care is they will take on the mental labor of explaining that to you, to help you out with it, to make your life better. And it does, I can imagine that as a child, that would probably kind of tend to rub adults the wrong way. Just being like, no, you're doing, why aren't you doing it this way? This is like more logical. And so that would be stressful if you're constantly seeing people, working through life and doing things what seems illogical, because your TE isn't just about getting things done. It's paired with that NI, which is future forecasting and narrowing it down to the best possible like option. Like you were saying earlier, you're trying to narrow down the possibilities, pare it down to what makes the most future sense, and then the TE is trying to act on that. So if you see people bringing in more possibilities or not staying focused on the right future end goal, then that would be really frustrating and stressful as well. Yeah, absolutely. So
yeah,
but go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say another big area for INTJs when they're kids is that they tend to be really afraid of vulnerability. They're very guarded about their emotions and their feelings. And so a lot of times if there is something going on with an INTJ when they're young, you may not know it. That's another struggle that a lot of young INTJs face, is not feeling confident confiding in other people about their feelings. And definitely something I can relate to a lot. And Daniel, you're a thinking type, so you might relate to that also. Mm-hmm. But especially ITJs, because they have their third function is introverted feeling. Introverted feeling tends to be more internal. It's less obvious on the outside. And so because of that, it's really hard to tell what an INTJ is feeling. But they often feel a lot more sensitive on the inside than other people realize. but they often don't know who can I trust, who can I confide in, and they can often feel like they're being they're putting themselves in a precarious situation what if they were to share their feelings. So let's move on then, because we have 16 types to get through. I want to talk about ISFJs and ISTJs. I hope we have some of them here with us today. ISFJs and ISTJs, they are dominant introverted sensing types. And if you don't know what that is, that's fine. These types are very aware of details. They're always looking for a sense of stability, security, and a sense of just knowing what to expect and being able to rely on it through their own experience. They have a harder time with change, with unknowns and unpredictability. They like facts. They like accumulating facts. They like special traditions and routines that kind of stand the test of time. The struggles that I hear a lot about from ISFJs and ISTJs, I wrote some of them down here. They really do not like a lot of inconsistency. I once knew an ENFP mother who had an ISTJ son, and she's like, I don't know what's wrong with my son. He comes home every day and wants to listen to the same audiobook and play with Legos for hours every single day. I think there's something wrong with him. I think maybe he's depressed. And he wasn't depressed. He just loved that routine. After a busy day at school, he just loved being able to come home and have that predictable, calm, quiet time to himself, to work with things he knows. But if life is really inconsistent and unpredictable, if the schedule's always changing, that can feel awful to a young ISTJ or ISFJ. That's a huge struggle I've heard about a lot from them. They also tend to replay any kind of failure, embarrassing moment, or past mistake a lot. One of the struggles with introverted sensing is that introverted sensing types tend to compare and contrast past to present quite a bit. And with that comes ruminating on that embarrassing thing you said, or that awkward moment you had in gym class, or the bad grade you got, and kind of getting stuck in looping the memory over and over again. And that can be a really difficult thing for young ISFJs and ISTJs. So parents of ISFJs and ISTJs can help them by helping them stay grounded in the present moment. Things like meditation and mindfulness exercises can be super helpful for them, as well as sharing your own embarrassing stories from your childhood. It can help them to feel less alone, and can help them to feel like they have solidarity with someone and that this is normal. They're not an aberration to have had these moments. Another big thing, because ISFJs and ISTJs tend to take responsibility and rules very seriously, they can sometimes get stuck being parentified. I've known so many ISFJs who kind of become almost second moms in household with lots of children, are given a lot of responsibility. And because they tend to take on responsibility without a whole lot of complaining, they just can sometimes take on more than is age appropriate for themselves. Now, to get into ISFJs and ISTJs specifically, big struggle, not a problem, but a struggle for all feeling judging types is that they tend to feel responsible for other people's emotional well-being. So for ISFJs, it can mean if there's someone's unhappy in their home, they feel like it's their job to fix it. And we have an ISFJ child, Daniel and I do. And I mean, Daniel, I'll let you talk for a minute. You've seen this in action, so you could talk a little bit about our ISFJ child and how he deals with that.
Yeah. So he's like the sweetest kid ever, and he cares deeply about everyone in the family. And so when he notices if there's any particular stress, if like we're trying to get a lot done and we're on a time crunch, and like Susie, we're just trying to focus and finish cooking dinner and cleaning and just all the stuff, he'll notice the stress in the air, and he'll very kind of softly come in from the corner and be like, hi, is there anything I can do to help? Would you like me to, like, very, very like conscious that he wants to try to take that burden off of us to lighten the air. And he'll also notice if like his siblings are getting like super argumentative or really difficult. He'll be like, hey guys, maybe we should just wait and see what mom and dad say. Like pulling them back kind of to the rules and to the structure of what proper operation should be. but in that very like caring kind of like, hey, let's do this together, you know, this auxiliary FE that's really caring and trying to keep everybody in the right vibe. And he does, that is, I think, a burden for him sometimes, because it is such a strong caring feeling that he wants things to be good all the time with everyone, that it kind of puts him on edge, I think, sometimes if things are a little tense or super busy or chaotic around him. And so that can be difficult for him to deal with and to process and to handle. I know we've been telling him many times, listen, I love that you care, but it's not your job to take that on for this person or for that person, or to try to deal with this for them, right? Like they need to be able to process and deal with this themselves. I love that you care about them and you want to help, and that's super sweet, but you've got to know kind of where that edge is, that limit of what you are or aren't responsible for.
Absolutely. Yeah. There, as an example, I go to a homeschool group, and at one point there was a little boy who was just like kept beating up on my ISFJ son. My ISFJ son was a lot bigger than him, but he was just like, it's okay. I don't think the other kids, they never want to play with him because, you know, he's always hitting people and stuff. So I think he's just sad. And he was like, it's okay if he wants to take my toy. So sometimes for little ISFJs, they're the sweetest kids, but they just have to be protected. I mean, that line, protect at all costs. That's how I feel about ISFJ kids, because they are so deeply caring, and they can often over consider other people's feelings and then forget about their own in the process. For ISTJs, they also tend to be very sensitive people. The way they show they care is a little bit more about hands-on practicality. Like maybe they won't sit and talk with you about your feelings for an hour, but they might be like, oh, can I help you with your homework? Or maybe mom or dad needs some help with, you know, chores. These are they tend to have a more practical approach to caring. But sometimes they really need to talk about those deeper feelings, and they don't know who to trust with them, or they don't feel comfortable talking about them. And so having a parent who can be patient with them and not push them to talk about their feelings, but also let them know it's okay to talk. Never, ever, if an ISTJ ever shares something personal with you as a parent, definitely never go around sharing that with other people, though, because that will be a major betrayal of trust, and they probably will not talk to you about their feelings ever again. So super, super important. Another thing, ISTJs tend to look very serious. They kind of have that RBF going on, all their feelings are on the inside. And so sometimes people can think, oh, they're mean, they're distant, they don't want to spend time with us, or maybe they don't have a sense of humor. And sometimes they can be kind of ignored or sidelined because of that, when really a lot of the time it's just that they're thinking, maybe they're anxious. A lot of times they're trying to get the lay of the land before they jump right into action. And they do, just like all kids, they do want connections, they do want friendships, they do want to feel like they fit in. But sometimes it's really difficult for them when they feel like they're being judged by, you know, that resting face that they don't even realize they're making sometimes. Yeah, so let's see if you are, I know we have John here who is an ISTJ, and he's talked about, he said here, I've had to become second dad at age 12 after my dad passed away. That had to have been especially difficult. And sadly, I've heard from so many ISTJs and ISFJs who had to take on a lot of responsibility very young, and partially just because the people in their lives knew they would do it. They wouldn't just, and I'm not saying that's necessarily what happened with you, John, but a lot of people just sense that, okay, this kid's going to have a handle on things and they're going to do the responsible thing. So let's talk now about ENFPs and ENTPs. ENFPs are big idea people. They love to brainstorm. They love to explore possibilities, generate options. They love to imagine, and they love to think about potential and what could be. Where they struggle is with the details of life, that nitty-gritty stuff. Knowing what day was it that I had to hand that homework project in, or did I remember to drink some water today? I can't remember. That kind of stuff is what's really more of a challenge for ENFPs and ENTPs. These are some of the biggest childhood struggles that I've heard about from ENFPs and ENTPs. One, they really need a lot of freedom. They only need a lot of time to explore, to imagine, to tinker and experiment. And a lot of routine tends to feel, like I wrote here, like a slow death. Childhood is so full of routine, whether you're in school and you have to get from one place to another and sit and listen, or whether your home life is really regimented and there's a lot of authority and doing things because someone said so. That can feel just like a total wet blanket on all your intuition, all your ideas, and all the great things you want to explore for an ENFP or an ENTP. Another thing with them is they chase a lot of ideas at once, and sometimes they overcommit or they take on too many things because everything seems so exciting, especially group projects or anything creative. Anything that gets them working with other kids, that kind of thing is going to be so exciting to them. But sometimes then they overcommit and then they burn themselves out because in the process of going after all these ideas, they become more and more out of touch with their physical body. And that's what's happening because of that inferior introverted sensing. So a lot of times if they're really busy and they have a lot going on, they'll forget to drink water. They might forget to use the bathroom. They might forget to eat the food that they have in their lunchbox. And we have an ENTP daughter. And I can't tell you the number of times she's come back she goes to a homeschool like academy every week, and she comes back and she hadn't even touched her lunch. She totally forgot about it in the just, conversing with other kids or working on projects. She just forgot that she had it. She forgets that she's eating halfway through meals so many times. And then, oh, wait, she comes back an hour later. I forgot about that. So there's definitely a struggle with young ENPs with just remembering those physical details, remembering what their body needs. And that can lead to health problems. It can lead to burnout, a lot of adverse effects just from that alone. Procrastination can be a hard thing for ENFPs and ENTPs because there's so much exciting stuff to explore. Sometimes, and starting a project is so exciting. It's just, there's such a hit of dopamine when they get to start something new. But then as they start it, they start thinking about other ideas related to that. So they start experimenting with those. And then before you know it, their room is filled with half-finished projects. And they forgot that they had to turn in their history report, tomorrow. So they might be up at midnight trying to cram for that. Procrastination can be a huge struggle for them. And related to that, another struggle can be that because of their more energetic, exploratory style and the way they can connect one idea to another, sometimes people, instead of seeing that for what it is, which is really, really ingenious, a lot of people just brush it off as being, oh, that's ADHD or that's flaky. And they don't get the credit they deserve for how quick their minds can form connections. Instead of that being seen as a beautiful thing, it's seen as something kind of silly, or it's discounted or dismissed. And then there's a question here from Kate from Lightbearers Library. She said, are all your kids different types? Do you have any overlaps? They are all different types. We have 5 kids. I would say we have an ESFJ, an ENTP, an ISFP, an ISFJ, and probably an ESTP. But one of them is still kind of young, so it's still a little hard to tell. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, and we have a comment here from Doug. He says, school sucks on a lot of levels for lots of types. It's also more authoritarian than I remember it. I'm a supply teacher. And I 100% agree with you. There's so many amazing teachers out there. So I definitely don't want to say school sucks and it's the teacher's fault, because I think that the teachers are trying to do the best that they can. I know so many who just love pouring their hearts into each and every student, but it's gotten so regimented, and I know a lot of teachers who are struggling with that as well. There's less room for creativity and really any kind of one-on-one connection. So let's see, if we were going to talk a little bit about the specific struggles that ENFPs and ENTPs face because of that feeling-thinking difference. So ENFPs, they tend to have a really energetic, fun-loving, funny side, and often they can end up playing the role of class clown sometimes. And so sometimes they try to act like life isn't, like criticism isn't hitting them too hard. But at the same time, it does. They do tend to be more sensitive than they let on. But they often don't really want to give others the pleasure of seeing their sensitivity. So if someone were to insult them, they're more likely to laugh it off or act like it doesn't irk them than to say something about it. But inside, it can really hurt quite a lot. Sometimes ENFPs get stuck having a lot of fair weather friends because they're really fun people. They tend to bring up the mood a lot. They're a get things going interaction style. And because they focus on that a lot, especially as children, people can be like, oh, you're the fun one. You're supposed to always be fun. And then when they are actually having a hard day, sometimes their friends don't know what to do about it. And that can be a real struggle for young ENFPs. And then they get labeled as quirky or out there or flaky, and they don't get credit, like I said before, for some of the ingenuity of who they are and what they can do. As idealists, they see all the things that the world could be, all the potential that's there, and they tend to have a real heart for the underdogs. So one thing that's really hard for a lot of ENFPs is seeing corruption in the world or hearing news about really terrible things happening to animals or to a certain cause that they care about. That can be really hard for them, even as young children. ENTPs, a different set of struggles. They tend to enjoy debate. For them, getting to the truth of something is the most exciting thing. It's really exciting for them to explore possibilities but then to poke holes in their ideas and to poke holes in beliefs and to poke holes in any like argument or supposed fact that's presented to them. That's their extroverted intuition and their introverted thinking kind of working together. And in the process, sometimes they can be seen as insensitive, or other people can get their feelings hurt. They don't like that. They generally aren't out there trying to be mean or anything like that. But they can definitely accidentally come across rude or trollish. And they can sometimes, if they're bored, which tends to happen a lot in school, because they're being forced to just sit still and listen, and there's a lot of memorization and rote work, then they might just try to stir the pot a little bit just to get something going, to feel a little bit of energy or excitement. And I see Daniel nodding his head. A lot of times ENTPs and ESTPs both struggle with some of these same issues. So I'm definitely curious to hear Daniel's thoughts on this as we get to the ESTP section. And then there's a comment here from, let's see, Carote. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and I'm afraid I'm butchering it. She said, during my childhood, what I was very frustrated by is when my parents didn't make sense and wouldn't listen to my arguments, because then they said I was being manipulative or that I was always right. And thank you so much for sharing that. I think that is a very common problem with thinking perceiver types. It's seen as just being disrespectful rather than a genuine desire to get to the truth about something. Daniel, you're an ESTP, and this same thing happened to you as a kid. You want to feel like sharing anything about that?
Well, I mean, I actually was manipulative. So as an ESTP, I just was like, I would spend time thinking about all the different systems and things that occurred in our house, because both of my parents were like introverted sensors and very like regimented, and we just had ways we did things. So it was very easy for me to be like, well, if I say this happened at this point in the system, they're not going to anyway. So yeah. But I was very much misunderstood as the only perceiver, I believe, in my family. And wanting to be able to be spontaneous, and as well as being like logical and wanting to understand the systems behind like why we did things or how things worked. And so yeah, it was a struggle a little bit to put out what seemed like very logical way of doing things or expectation, or hey, why should I have to do this? I mean, I'm the only boy. I had two sisters. I'm the youngest. So, I felt like there was a lot of difference between what should be expected of me versus my sisters. But, my SJ parents were like, no, it's going to be the same for every child. Didn't feel the same, because overall expectations and goals and roads in life were just different for all of us. So it felt, unequal. But so yeah, there was definitely a lot of like shutting down my my way of thinking because it just didn't match with anybody else's in the family. So it did feel very kind of repressive. Yeah. So I can definitely identify that way with how ENTPs would probably be looked at that way.
Yeah. I someone let's see, where's the comment? It was Kale who said he was told he was brandishing dangerous logic quite a bit growing up myself. And I've never heard that term, but I feel like using it sometime, ironically. Yeah, if you are an NTP, then you tend to think outside the box. You tend to see holes in people's value systems and their beliefs very quickly. And sometimes things that people really don't want questioned. Like maybe it's a relationship they have with someone, or maybe it's their religion and or the way they're practicing it. Like they can find, or maybe it's even politics, they can find like, well, this doesn't make sense, or this is inconsistent. And then because it's personal to someone, people take offense pretty quickly on that. So definitely a big struggle for a lot of NTPs. All right, so let's move to I hate to be rushing through this. I feel like I have to rush through it because we want to get through all 16 types. But we'll do it anyway. Sometime we'll just do like one type at a time. ESFPs and ESTPs, and these are dominant extroverted sensing types. That means that they're all about living in the present moment, grabbing life by the horns and like really seizing the day. Like they are the types that are going to think about, well, what can we do now? Not just like in the sense of like, what can we talk about? A lot of times people think of extroverts and they think of chatterboxes, but ESTPs really like to get into action. They really like to be out there, like diving into the water, climbing the nearest tree. They like to be up and moving. And so a lot of times what they struggle with in childhood is just feeling like they're forced to sit all the time. In school, there's a lot of struggle with them because they tend to learn best while they can be in action and when they can learn through hands-on activities. And so for ESFPs and ESTPs, if you just ask them to sit still and just listen or repeat facts, they tend to feel like they can't quite think. Like all their energy is being stifled, and that's taking so much of their attention that they can't quite process everything and remember it to the best of their ability. Instead, they want a kinesthetic learning experience, hands-on. They want to know, why does this matter in the real world? And what can I physically do to make this real? Or if it's something abstract, they need to be able to get up, move around. Like, can they walk around the room while the teacher is talking? Things like that. And of course, that's not how the school system works. And so they often feel like they're often labeled as problem children or troublemakers when they really don't want to be. They're not trying to be, but they just have a great need for action, for physical immersion in the world around them. And so that is a major struggle. In fact, Jane Kise, I think I'm pronouncing that right, she's done a TED Talk about personality type and how it shows up in school. And she's talked a lot about ESFPs and ESTPs, how they just need to work through trial and error with their hands in order to figure things out. They need to be able to make mistakes, get messy, and just kind of mess around with things without worrying about having it be perfect. And manipulatives, hands-on ways to practice the material is super, super important. Like ENPs, ESPs also struggle with procrastination, especially when it comes to like boring in their ideas, like conceptual theories, or a lot of book work that can be, they might put it off till the last minute. Because they have inferior introverted intuition, planning ahead can be kind of a struggle as well. They really are masters of the present moment. They're the types of people who they think quickly on their feet and they're practical, so they can be really great problem solvers in the moment. When it comes to just theorizing about what they want to do in the future, or how to plan out their homework routine or their schedule, that kind of stuff is just like, I don't know. What would be your what would have been your reaction to that as a kid, Daniel?
So it's really funny you mentioned that, because like we had an exercise in school. I was homeschooled, so it was with my mom and my sisters. We were sitting there doing school, and my mom's like, all right, so this is a good way so you guys kind of know what you want to do moving forward into the futures. You should have this, you should, always have kind of this forward moving, like 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year goals, right? Like like what you want to achieve within these time limits, which is a really good thing to have so that you can make sure you're kind of hitting your mark in your day to day. But, as a 8 or 9 year old ESTP boy, my future was limited to like thinking about when the next time was I could get outside to shoot hoops or jump on the trampoline or swing on the tree swing or get together, like that kind of activity. To think a year into the future, it was like, I have no idea what's going to be happening by then. So how do I know what I want to do, or how do I know how much I can accomplish in that amount of time? Maybe I select too big of a goal in too short of a time period, and then I'm going to give up because I'm not going to, it's going to become apparent that I can't accomplish. So it just seemed way too complicated to try to figure that out. So it's like, it just makes you just not even want to try.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I've definitely heard that from a lot of SPs. It's like the world is changing so rapidly. You really don't know what the world's going to look like or what your life's going to look like in the future. So why spend a lot of time it feels like wasting a golden opportunity in the present moment trying to plan for something that you can't predict. And so there's a lot of intelligence to that. As an INJ, I'm kind of like, but you can kind of predict certain things, but at the same time, it just, no matter what. So for INJ children, it's like, well, I want to dream about the future. Why are you distracting me with all this noise in the present moment? In contrast, an ESP is like, there's so much to do in the present moment. Why are you distracting me with having to think about the future? So it's kind of an opposite set of problems with them.
And I think for ESPs, they have a huge issue with fear of missing out. So it's like they want to take advantage of every opportunity in front of them. And when you're so focused on that, it is hard to look and think long term, because if you're doing that, you're missing something in the present moment.
Absolutely. And we've got a question here, I think, from Karen. She says, Daniel, that's like the interview question. Where do you want your career to go? What a dumb question.
I want it to go where I get paid the most. Like, duh. Isn't that what everybody wants?
It's so great Karen, I'm so glad you're here. It's so great to have another ESP in the chat. I feel like there's such an absence of ESP voices in the type community. So I would love to get, I love just seeing all the types here communicating. It's so great you're here. All right, so now we're going to get, oh, wait, no, we didn't go into the specifics for ESFPs and ESTPs. So ESFPs, because they're introverted feeling types, they tend to feel things more deeply than they necessarily show. Like ENFPs, they often try to keep the energy positive. And so sometimes they may laugh off criticisms or insults or things like that, but they actually feel it a lot more deeply than they let on in many cases. They also, because they tend to be really high energy types, and they tend to be funny, and they tend to, they're the fun, friendly people. Sometimes people assume that they're kind of shallow when that's not really the case. This is sorry, there's just one second. It looks like there's a problem with the chat here. I'm not sure if it's still working. Let's see. I don't know. It looks like maybe if there's I can't say if there's a problem with the chat, leave a message, but maybe you can check on that, Daniel, while I
talk about... I can check the chat in YouTube. I won't be able to check the one for Facebook though.
Okay. Or if you wouldn't mind, that would be awesome.
Yep.
So, and you can just make sure the stream's all working properly.
Yeah, it's still running.
ESFPs tend to have very strong and passionate values. And so they care about things, those causes, very deeply. I have I have a couple ESFP friends actually who know everything about the causes they're passionate about. For one, it's very political. For another one, it's very much related to animals. I mean, she takes care of every, she feeds raccoons on her bed after dinner every single night, really cares about animals, everything they can know about that. And they feel really passionately, and they're willing to do anything for the things that they believe in. And so the stereotype that they're kind of shallow, flighty, just all about fun, really misses a lot of the deeper passion that's going on with them. And they kind of have the same struggle that ENFPs have, where they might get a lot of fair weather friends, people who are drawn to them for their fun, for the fact that ESFPs kind of make life feel like an adventure, like you never know what to expect. They're very exciting people to be around, but sometimes those same friends can kind of disappear when things get hard. And ESFPs struggle sometimes to know even how to talk about things when they're hard. Like, how do I talk about my feelings? Everyone expects me to be the fun person or to be the one who makes everyone laugh. And when they're kids, it can feel like they don't even know sometimes how to switch channels and how to express their deeper struggles. So if you're a parent of a feeling of an EFP, it's really important to make time before they're, when they're lying in bed at night, before they go to sleep, to just ask them to share what's on their heart. Make sure they feel like they have a judgment-free zone to express not just the good, but the bad. And sometimes starting a habit of kind of going over the highs and lows of their day before bed, starting that early can be really helpful way of letting them know it's okay to talk about the struggles that they're having too. And it's a safe place to do that. For ESTPs, a lot of the struggles they have in relation to their thinking function are going to feel similar to those of the ENTP. They hate inefficiency. Anything that's slow or stagnant. They don't really like doing things by the book if there's a faster way to do it. They hate arbitrary rules or systems. So if there's a rule, they want to know why. They want it to make sense. And anything that just feels like, oh, we're doing it because I said so, or if they get the answer because I said so, then that's super annoying for ESTPs. And like ENTPs, they tend to poke holes in rules, beliefs, or systems. Like, does this really stand up to scrutiny? And as a result, parents or teachers sometimes label them as troublemakers or disrespectful, and they get punished. Daniel, as an ESTP, are you relating to these things?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As a 16, 17-year-old with, my first car, I logically came up with the idea that if I'm the first person to a four-way stop, I shouldn't even have to stop if it's obvious that I'm the first person, because the first person to the stop sign gets to go anyway. So why stop? I'm saving time by not stopping. And I would actually do that. So I'm not suggesting it, but it was just like the logic of it in a way does make sense. And so that was, that was an inefficient system to me. Like, why should everybody have to stop if the first person is going to go first anyway? Just go. Yeah. So that was my thing. But no, I'm all about, I don't know. I feel like everybody around me is moving in slow motion. So I'm always trying to look at, like, okay, you're talking and trying to do this thing. Just do the thing. Just do it. Like, just focus on what you're trying to accomplish right now, and then we can move on. And that's always kind of been a thing that I've struggled with other people.
Yeah, I can testify to this as his very, very poor INTJ wife. He'll be like, all right, I'll be like, hey, we should go do this thing. And he's like, all right, everyone go. And I'm like trying to get the kids ready. Why is everyone moving so slow? Yeah. I think that for ESTP, specifically because we're talking about children here, in school settings, or, maybe sitting at church for several hours on a Sunday morning. And don't do it for several hours now. We grew up in the 80s when church was a lot longer. Yeah. It could probably feel a little bit like you're being held underwater. Would you say that's a little?
Yeah. It's like you're fidgety, but it's like your muscles are just twitching on their own. It's like you're not consciously trying to make yourself just like energetic, but you just are. And it is like a slow death. It's like a torture, having to be still, and not be engaged in some kind of activity or movement or something that you're actually interested in.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah, because if you're not like an INFJ who can like go off into their head during those moments as easily, not that you can't, but it's just not as natural.
Yeah.
All right, so I know we have Barbara here at ISTP, so we're going to talk about INTPs and ISTPs next. So if you are an ITP and you have an anecdote from your childhood, something that you struggled with, or a question you have about your type and as it relates to childhood, leave that in the chat. So as dominant introverted thinking types, INTP and ISTP children, they're trying to figure out what they can really trust. And I know I've used the term poking holes, but they really do that. They've really mastered the art of finding inconsistencies. And sometimes it can look like hair splitting when they're children. You know, you can say, I was just talking to an ITP, and they were saying how they were told all these facts as a child by their teachers. And they'd be like, well, how do we know that's true? Like scientific facts. How do we know that that's true? How do we know that this planet is this far from the Earth? I mean, did someone really go up there and measure it? And these kinds of questions where they tend to question the things that everyone just wants them to accept. Someone smarter than you figured this out, but that's not good enough for an introverted thinking type. They want to know it for themselves. They want to question it for themselves. They want to research and analyze it for themselves. And so having to just believe something because someone else out there studied it can be super frustrating for an INTP or an ISTP. On top of that, just like we've talked about with the ENTPs, they can be very questioning of beliefs, values, rules that other people hold very dear. And sometimes in their yearning to get to the truth, because that's their huge desire in life, sometimes they can be seen as disrespectful, rude, or rebellious. And that's just super frustrating for them because they're not necessarily trying to be anti-authoritarian necessarily, or they're not always trying to be rebellious or disrespectful. To them, they don't see anything disrespectful about asking questions. In fact, they love it when other people ask questions, right? That's just shows that you're listening. It shows that you care, right? But for them, asking those questions often gets them a stern look or discipline or something like that. So those can be some major struggles for ITPs. And I see a comment from Kale, hole poking is practically a pastime. Yeah, I love that answer. So some of these things we've already touched on, the struggles that they both have. They dislike arbitrary rules, authority figures. ITPs are kind of famous for disliking rank, like feeling like they have to listen to what someone says and do what they say just because they're older than them or they have some title. That feels like they tend to trust people more who have proven it or who are just genuinely interested and they put a lot of time into mastering something. I was actually doing a session with an INTP recently, and I was explaining that, well, I can't really give advice about this certain thing because I'm not a trained specialist in that field. In fact, I said I didn't even go to college, right? I'm certified in Myers-Briggs. I'm certified in Enneagram. I've been studying it for like 20 years, but I don't have a psychology degree. And he's like, oh, I like you even more. And I had to laugh because this is this thing that I'm so self-conscious about. But he's like, no, I like you even more that you just like love learning this on your own, but you don't need that external validation, right? And so ITPs tend to feel like proven mastery is more important than credentials or rank. And so sometimes they can be a little skeptical of someone's authority if they're like, well, I'm older than you, so you should listen to me. At the same time, they're often more sensitive than they let on, and they can take criticism pretty hard. Highly emotional situations can be a real challenge for them. They can often struggle to express their feelings. They can often struggle to know how to respond to people who are being really emotional. There's a lot of uncertainty around the emotional interplay between people. And so being in a situation where, say, someone's crying, like maybe they're at the playground and one of their friends starts breaking down and crying. They're like, well, oh no, what am I supposed to do? You know, that can be a major source of insecurity for them. At the same time, any kind of emotional manipulation or people pleasing is kind of anathema to them. Sometimes their parents just kind of give them scripts about how to respond emotionally to people or how to act. But that feels too inauthentic or performative to them. It doesn't feel honest. And so that can be a struggle. They really don't like that very much either. I see Brittany says, I hate emotions. and yeah, I think, you know, it's for the most of the ITPs I know they enjoy connecting with people. But if there is a strong emotion, then it's like, oh crap, what do I do? I feel like I've seen a picture once of someone. It was like a GIF or something. There's someone crying and there's another person with a long broom just kind of patting them on the shoulder saying, they're there.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably kind of how ITPs feel when someone's crying, like, they're there. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but hopefully this helps. And obviously, everyone can grow in these strengths, right? But in childhood, you haven't really, it's a much harder to be, developed in extroverted feeling when you're a kid. So it's especially difficult in childhood. Oh, by the way, Daniel, can you select comments to put up on the...
I cannot, unfortunately.
Okay.
Because
All right,
I am just your lowly guest.
I want to make sure that I'm not missing any comments here.
I can point some out if you want at different times, but yeah.
I see one here from Kale says, absolutely, wanting to help but having no idea how to soothe someone else is a big problem, even in my 30s. And yeah, I think INTPs, ISTPs, they do care just because but their way of showing they care tends to show up more. For INTPs, it's more as brainstorming possibilities, looking for new ways of understanding the situation or new perspectives. For ISTPs, it can be looking for a practical solution or maybe showing you a good experience to help you feel more grounded in the present moment. But the whole emotional responsiveness part can be really scary, especially when they're kids. Now, to go into some of the specific struggles they face based on that intuitive or sensing difference, these are some of the major things I've heard. For INTPs, they can have the NP struggle of starting hobbies or researching things, then kind of going off on different rabbit trails at the same time, and then having a bunch of unfinished projects or running into deadlines that they kind of snuck up on them. Forgetting details, that can be a major thing. Like, they're really interested in things that are conceptually inspiring, things that trigger their imagination or their sense of what if. But if it's something like, here's, memorize this group of facts, that can be really, really boring to them. Now, they like learning facts, but they might read one fact, start questioning it, start researching it, and then before you know it, they didn't memorize the facts in the first place. I'm just going to take a sip of water really quick. Feel free to jump in, Daniel, if you have a thought, because I know you have experience with ITPs as well.
Yeah. I think for as a child, I think probably a lot of their frustrations come from the parents having expectations on them that don't align with allowing their NE to kind of run wild, because that's going to be very strong for them. And then their TI, which would want to have that logical connection, not really connecting necessarily with the family as well, because of the low FE is going to feel awkward trying to do that, trying to make that connection, trying to understand the overall vibe of things is going to be a struggle. And so it could possibly lead to them feeling kind of outcast and not a part of the very family that they are in.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I know a lot of ITPs struggle with is shyness when they're kids. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily think that because they can be so brave when it comes to questioning things, right? Like, a teacher could say, this is the truth, this thing happened in history, right? And they might question it and be like, actually, that's just one interpretation, but if you look at it this other way, right? And they can seem, because of that, they can seem very brave. But at the same time, it hits them pretty early on that their hunger for truth and their just yearning to correct misinformation as well is sometimes just seen as arrogant or rebellious. And so sometimes they feel like the very thing that really makes them come alive, like their hero function, is kind of a problem. Or they feel like nobody gets it, nobody understands it, or the people just don't like them because of it. And so for ITPs, they often deal with some insecurities related to that, as well as some shyness, because in those big social situations, if you're not quite sure what the vibe is, or how to just get into that emotional interplay with people, it can feel stressful to be in situations where you have to do a lot of small talk, and a lot of that just emotional, like reading the room and things like that. And I like Brittany said, oh God, I never finish anything, 252 tabs open at all times. And yeah, I think that's definitely an NP struggle right there. And then for ISTPs, when they're in school, if things are getting really abstract and conceptual, they really like things that they can dig their hands into. They really like practical stuff. They like direct experience. They like working with things that they can see the tangible application for it in their real life. They want to know, how am I going to actually use this? And if it's just, let's talk about a philosopher and his understanding of life, let's talk about Descartes or something, then they can kind of check out of that kind of situation because they're like, I don't know how I'm going to use this information. They tend to also feel really restless in those slow, repetitive, rigid, very structured situations. If they have a really structured school life and then their home life is also super structured and regimented, then they'll probably feel like they're being held down in the water. I would imagine. Daniel, you're an STP, and we kind of talked about that a little bit already. SPs like to be active. They like to be able to use their knowledge in the real world. They don't really like a lot of structure. They really hate micromanaging.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not an ISTP, so like my SE is higher than my TI, and so activity for me was definitely life. Even as a kid, I didn't use my introverted thinking like as much because I was still at my auxiliary function, my second function, so I'm still not quite as strong in it. Yes, I use it, but I would wear out of that fairly quickly. But when it came down time to use it, I could go all in. But it was like you've mentioned before, if I could use it, if I could engage my introverted thinking in a very kinesthetic way, that was by far the best. Give me the screwdriver, let me take the lawnmower apart, let me build this thing, let me see if I can build a fort off the back of my garage, let me get the hands on the rototiller, like all of the things. And I did do a lot of that stuff at a much younger age than probably most kids would have, because it made sense to me, how it worked and how to manipulate it in the world around me. So I know that ISTPs, that their TI, they're far and above like my TI use, and sometimes I'm just in awe of their understanding of the complex systems that they can really just hold in their head, and they just get it. And I wish I could do that. But yeah, I think sitting and being forced to just listen to lectures and just being forced to think about, theoretical is kind of the kiss of death of my attention.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a comment here from Kale. I find I need stability, not repetition. Memorizing dates and names were easy, so I ended up learning history through cause and effect. That's super interesting. And Kale, I think you said ISTP was your type, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was INTP. My brain is losing the details as we speak. You'll have to leave a note in the comment. Let me know for sure which type that was. Now let's move on to INFPs and ISFPs, the dominant introverted feeling types. These types are all about, for them, they want to live a life that feels in alignment with their values, what they feel is right or wrong, where their heart is guiding them. These types really care about knowing how they feel and making sure that they're weighing all their choices and decisions in a way that feels right. Like they're always questioning, is this what I really want? Does it feel like ethical, what I'm doing, the decisions I'm making? Do I feel peace about where I'm at? And so anything that conflicts with that is a major struggle for INFPs and ISFPs. And how this can show up, these are just some of the ways that I've heard INFPs and ISFPs talk about some of the struggles that they have when they're growing up. Feeling misunderstood is a big one. They tend to be sensitive, not necessarily in the crybaby sense that some of the stereotypes would imply. INFPs and ISFPs tend to be pretty protective of their feelings, and they're not necessarily anxious to show them to the world. But at the same time, as children, those feelings just come out. And because they feel things so deeply, they're often labeled as being too sensitive or dramatic or as overreacting to things. And that being told that you are responding that way and you're being told that over and over again does a lot of damage to IFPs growing up. They dealing with conflict or criticism is really hard for them. Any kind of criticism or like that should be given very gently. There should be time for them to process it. And, especially like shouting. Every IFP I've known, if there's shouting in the home, it's soul crushing for them. Sometimes they feel powerless. Sometimes their values aren't necessarily accepted by the mainstream. I was once if you've read Charlotte's Web, the story of Fern Arable, right? And her dad is going to take the runt of the litter, the runt pig, out and butcher it. She's like, no, Dad, you can't do that. There's something wrong with him. It's not fair that he should die, right? And I believe Fern Arable was an INFP. And they will do anything to protect the values that they hold dear, to protect the causes and the underdogs that they care about. But sometimes they don't have a dad as nice as Fern Arable's dad. Sometimes they don't have a parent who appreciates their values. They don't have someone who is respecting their values. And so that sense of feeling powerless, of having to go against what they feel is right, is a real hardship for them. I know IFPs who have questioned their parents' discipline methods, or they grew up in abusive families or situations like that. And of course, that's bad for anyone. But for IFPs who feel things so deeply and who have such a strong sense of what's right or wrong or ethical or not ethical, and are constantly trying to get that alignment with their values, it hits especially hard. Another thing that can be a struggle for them is that they're more focused on getting the best result than they are in just productivity and time. And so sometimes they feel like, as an example, like if they had a project at school, writing an essay, they'd probably put their heart into it. They would try to figure out what it meant to them personally and try to do a really good job and hand in something that really they could feel proud of. But at the same time, in the process of doing that, they might lose track of the details, or they might, not lose track of the details, that's the wrong thing. They might lose track of the deadline, is what I meant to say. And they might look at people like TJ types, be like, wow, look at them. They're getting so much done so quickly. But for them, for IFPs, it's more about getting a high quality outcome. And so they don't ever want to put their heart, they don't ever want to hand something in that doesn't feel like they really did their best in it. And so sometimes they compare themselves to other types they see as being more productive or having more output, and they see themselves, or they think to themselves, well, why can't I get so much done as fast as these other people? And more assertive types, people who are more outspoken, who are more regimented, follow more routines and things like that. They might compare themselves to those types of people and struggle to keep up, or feel like, oh, I'm just not good enough because I'm not having the same output as them, or I don't see things as logically as they do. That can be a real challenge. And I'm going to just check the comments really quick. It's hard for me to read them as I'm talking. But I see Kate said, I love Fern. I love Fern too. I read that book 5 times as a kid. Charlotte's Web, everyone. It's good no matter how old you are. And yes, Kale says, best results possible, the behind-the-scenes interaction style approach. Yes, so INFPs and ISFPs both have a behind-the-scenes interaction style, which means that they're trying to get the best result they can, which means they tend to make slower decisions, but they tend to look at lots of sources of information to try to integrate them and get the best possible results. So they can feel really frustrated when they see other people just like working on a schedule or just getting things done fast, and they're like, why can't I get things done that quickly? And then when we're dealing with INFPs, sometimes a big issue for them is that they can really have these big, huge hopes and dreams for the future. They're dreamers by nature. They're idealists. They're always thinking forward about, how they could change the world, how they could improve it. They really want to make an impact a positive impact on the world for the specific causes they care about. But sometimes it's hard for them to know how to do that in some kind of a tangible way. They're great idea people. They can come up with ideas. They can write often they can be really moving writers. But sometimes when it comes to the actual logistics of the plan, that's where they can get a little bit lost. So I know a lot of INFP children who have big dreams and big ideas, and then their parents are just kind of trying to pull them down to earth. Like, no, that's not realistic. We can't do that. Or why don't you focus on these other details that we can work on now? And it can feel like their ideas and their dreams are getting dismissed all the time. They can also get stuck in their head, stuck in their ideas and their imagination. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think if you're an IN type, being in your head is really amazing and fun. I mean, that's, for me, that was my favorite place to be as a kid. But at the same time, it can mean that they can lose touch with some of those physical needs that intuitives struggle with. So INFPs can have the same struggles that other IN types have, which is getting so lost in your imagination that you might forget to drink, you might forget to use the bathroom when you need to, or forget to eat the food in your lunchbox. So young INFP children can struggle with that. Procrastination can be a struggle. Another thing that's a major struggle, especially for teenage INFPs, is replaying negative past memories. So that's somewhere where their introverted sensing side can bubble up. A lot of times INFPs, if they do something they regret, especially something that they see as maybe a moral failing in some way, they tend to ruminate on it and replay it over and over and over again and really be hard on themselves in relationship to that. Harder than a lot of types would be. So having parental guidance, learning to forgive themselves and to focus on, so authenticity is really big. A lot of times you hear authenticity ascribed to introverted feeling. So one thing that really helps IFPs, because they do tend to be really hard on themselves, is if a parent talks to them about openly and authentically about their own failures. A lot of times parents don't do this because they're like, oh no, I need to seem perfect to my children. It's very humbling to share your mistakes and your flaws with your children. And I'm not saying you have to talk about the really serious stuff like, oh yeah, me and your dad were fighting. Not like that, all right? Age appropriate revelations. Talk about the mistakes you made as a kid and talk about how you can understand how they're feeling. That will make them feel like it's okay for them to talk about their own mistakes and that they're not an aberration. For ISFPs, one of the big struggles is that planning piece. SPs like to be in the moment. They like to seize the opportunities that they have. And especially when they're young, they spend so much time in the classroom sitting still and kind of being reined in. But when they're not there, they really want to be doing something, whether that's painting or singing or exploring, being outside, whatever it is. They want to be working with their hands. They want to be, actually experiencing the world around them. So sometimes when they have to do like long-term planning or they have to do a bunch of homework after that, that just feels awful to them. We have an ISFP daughter, and I feel like, Daniel, I haven't given you much of a chance to talk. So
No, I mean you're doing great, baby. You're doing great. Good job. Keep it up.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience with her and her homework. But I mean, we don't want to actually like point her out. No one knows who she is here.
Because here's the thing, though, I will say is for any subject or topic that she was interested in, she would absorb so much material so quickly and have it down and know it. And so I think that is key for, I think, anybody is if you can learn the things that you're interested in, it's definitely easier. But when it came to things like, I taught her math, right? I should say I tried to teach her math. And I would get, I would get very frustrated because I'd be like, listen, I've gone over this math concept for like 2 weeks straight. And one day it seems like she's kind of getting a grasp on it. And the next day or over the weekend, she's completely forgotten everything that I taught her about it. None of the language used to describe the concept or any of that was like still there. And it literally, I kind of felt bad for her because I could see as I'm trying to teach her that it looked like I was literally torturing her to death. Because it just wasn't, it was too, I don't know, reined in and linear and structured and not what she was interested in, not the freedom to creatively explore her interest. at all, and not her preferred outlet by far. So that was definitely, I mean, that was really, really tough for her, for sure.
Yeah, so one way we could definitely see the ISFP expressing themselves during math was she would do amazing artwork on the margins of the math book. Absolutely stunning, like mind-blowingly beautiful artwork about someone being mad that they had to do math. It'd
Yes,
be like
very graphic
the
sometimes.
homework wouldn't necessarily be done, but thered be this incredible picture of someone just like,
You knew how she was feeling.
yeah, like someone like just dying on their school desk or something, and I don't mean to say that IFPs, by the way, can't do math, because I've actually known some INFPs who actually teach math as college professors, so they absolutely can get math, but they have to find a way to make it personally significant, personally meaningful. Until an IFP feels any kind of personal meaning connected to what they're doing, it's very hard for them to be motivated. So it's like, why do they want to learn math? Getting into the why behind it can be a lot more helpful. I spoke to an INFP engineer once, and he talked about, I think he was an environmental engineer, and he talked about learning math became fascinating to him when he started seeing it as a mystery, like looking for the mystery and the to kind of turning it into a game, but also finding some magic in it. Now, I'm not entirely sure how he did it, what his whole formula was for that, but he definitely talked about finding the magic in the unknown and the mystery and the challenge of it, and bringing that into his job as an engineer. So if you can find a way to make math seem individualized or specifically meaningful to an IFP, then they'll have a lot more fun with it. But school that just feels like you're doing it because you have to pass some test is super unmotivating for IFPs. And a lot of times they just feel like they're not necessarily appreciated for the gifts that they're bringing into the world. A lot of the things where IFPs really shine are not necessarily prioritized in standardized testing, right? Like if you take the SATs, it's not going to ask you about your emotional intelligence. It's not going to ask you about understanding different perspectives from life, or how you can imagine a whole new future within the split second. It's not asking these kinds of questions, or maybe it's not asking about the things like the arts are not necessarily given as much credence in school as things like math or language arts. So that can be a real struggle sometimes, because the things that IFPs tend to naturally gravitate towards aren't given as much precedence. They sometimes feel like there's not a place for them in the world. And right now, a lot of young IFPs are struggling because a lot of their skills, like say, I know IFP writers and IFP artists, they feel like, oh no, like you can just get this through AI right now. And so they struggle with that too. It's like, well, oh, this really specific individual skill that I have is now being replaced by artificial intelligence. That can also be a real challenge for young IFPs. So finding a way to show them that you appreciate them, giving them specific compliments about the specific things that they do well, rather than generalized compliments, that means a lot to IFPs. Taking time one-on-one with them is really important. They tend to not open up as much in group situations. IFPs that I've talked to really benefited from a monthly date night with a parent, where they could just do something that's specific to their interests. Things like that are really, really special. And also, like I said, being willing to share your own mistakes and your own struggles and your own embarrassing moments or things like that. Reading books where people make mistakes and overcome. These are ways that you can help IFPs who are struggling with that kind of incessant self-criticism that they often struggle with. Doug says societal systems hate INFPs. And I hate that so much. I want to say that you're wrong, but I mean, I have seen this a lot, where just these incredible gifts that they have are not necessarily rewarded as much in the world as say an ETJ's gifts can be rewarded. And then Thomas asked a question: could an INFP start out as an ISFP child, or are these types stable? So according to Myers-Briggs theory, type is inborn and it doesn't change. But INFPs have a sensing side, ISFPs have an intuitive side. And so you might have an INFP who shows some qualities related to sensing sometimes, or you might have an ISFP who shows some intuitive hunches sometimes as well. And so they won't change types, but you will see their types develop in ways that they sometimes use non-preferred functions. And but yeah, they won't necessarily change, but life causes us to experiment with different functions. If you're an INFP and you're raised around sensors, then you might develop your sensing preferences more than the typical INFP would. But you also might feel perhaps a little stifled because you're not able to really lean into your intuitive function as well either. So now let's look at ENTJs and ESTJs, the dominant extroverted thinking types. These types are really good at organizing their world to achieve their goals. They're really good at setting goals, creating a structure, creating efficiency. They're good at strategy. They're good at logistics. These types like to make quick decisions, like to see that they're making quick, rapid progress towards their goals. The biggest struggles that ETJs mentioned when talking to me about their struggles with children, as being a child. Sorry, I'm an INTJ and I've been talking now for an hour and a half, and so my brain is starting to lapse here. That's why I make slides. But ENTJs and ESTJs as children often feel like what really bothered them was being treated like children. They were like, no, I'm ready. I'm ready for responsibility. I'm ready for challenges. I'm ready to take on the world. So being treated like they're incapable or being talked down to or condescended to was a major, major turnoff for ETJs. They didn't like being limited. They didn't like feeling like they had to wait till a certain age to do something. Like they felt like they could do it now. They also tend to get frustrated with adults who waste time, repeat directions, or can't decide. ETJs are super decisive people. They tend to believe that a quick decision is the best one because they can always course correct and change it if they need to. They hate dilly-dallying. They often, kind of like how Daniel was talking about how he feels like he's like everyone else is moving in slow motion as an ESTP. That's often how ENTJs and ESTJs feel as well. They feel like I've got things to do. I've got dreams I need to make a reality, goals I need to accomplish. And they can easily feel like they see exactly what needs to be done to make that happen. And then other people are like, oh, but let's just brainstorm for a while. Or here's how I feel about it. And then they're just like, oh my gosh, what is this? Why are we wasting time? Here's what we need to do. It's obvious to them. It's very obvious to them. Decisions are usually feel very obvious to them.
Well, and this honestly, I don't know how many of you guys have like heard of this guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, right? Like he's in marketing and advertising, and he's done a lot on social media. But like one thing he tells people all the time, he's like, you'll never know if you're going to hire the right person until you hire them. So hire them, and if they're not doing the right thing, then fire them. Then you can hire the next person and find out if they're like, just do the thing. Just like make these steps. Just go. Because then you can, like you're saying, you can course correct, you can change it, you can fix it, but until you make that decision and take that step, you can't do it. And so he's very much that extroverted thinker, like make things happen quickly example.
Yes, I definitely think he uses extroverted thinking. There's been some debate whether he's ENFP or ETJ. I'm not sure because I don't know enough about him to confidently type in, but he's definitely using extroverted thinking. That's a great example. Thank you for sharing that, Daniel. The other problem that ESTJ or ETJ struggle with is expressing their emotions. That feels very vulnerable for them. I know we talked about this a little bit last week, but when they're children, they tend to suppress all those like fear, anxiety, sensitivity, sadness, because to them it just feels like I said before, it feels like they're going to school with their clothes off and everyone's looking at them and pointing and laughing. That's how they feel if they were to try to express their feelings a lot of the time. And so sometimes they just turn, instead of dwelling on their actual feelings, they focus instead on work, on productivity, on getting things done, on action. So when they're a child, it doesn't necessarily work like going into the office. It can look more like coming up with plans and trying to get those into action. It can look like, my dad's an ENTJ, and he was always selling stuff at school. He had like a dozen different businesses when he was in school, and he was always trying to figure out ways to make money. And he was, mowing lawns or shoveling snow or selling things he bought cheap, selling them for double the cost, things like that. And tend to channel a lot of their hurt feelings or those negative feelings into hard work. So for some, it could be really putting all their energy into getting good grades or being in the student government. For others, it can be that entrepreneurial side. They're very independent. They don't like to feel like anyone is in control of them. They tend to like taking charge, and they tend to have a lot of discomfort about depending on other people, which being a child then is super annoying to them. It's like, I have to wait till I'm this age to get my driver's license, which means I have to wait till my parent can come home to drive me to this place. A lot of the limits and rules feel very arbitrary to them and like unnecessary roadblocks between them and the goal that they want to achieve. At the same time, they do care about people. A lot of times people see ETJs as these just like villains. I don't know how many times I've looked at characters in a TV show. I'm trying to find out their personality types, and everyone always types the bad guy as an ENTJ or an ESTJ. The bad guy is always an ETJ. And half the time that's not actually accurate at all. But people sometimes misinterpret ETJs as just being cold-hearted or kind of relentlessly pursuing their ambition and not really caring who gets hurt in the process. So ETJs do care about other people. They're often more sensitive than they let on, but they often don't know where to put that sensitivity. Just as, an INFP feels uncertain in the world of logistics, right? Like, how can I make this dream a reality? ETJs can struggle in the world of their own personal feelings, like knowing what they mean, how to make sense of them, what to do with them. And so sometimes those softer feelings, they feel really scared to share with other people. And sometimes in their efforts to take care of other people, instead of being outright saying, hey, I really care about you, let's talk about our feelings or share these, good vibes, they might help in a practical way. Like, hey, let me help you with your homework, or, let's go out and make some money or whatever it is. They might show it in a more indirect way or through a practical action. My ENTJ dad, if I was going to him for a problem, he might be like, well, let's look at your business plan, or let's look at your, financial strategies or things like that. Like, that might be the way he tries to show he cares, more so than saying, I really love you, tell me about what's going on. Like that might be a little bit harder for him to do. And then let's look at some of those specific struggles that ENTJs face versus ESTJs. Like all intuitives, they can struggle to take care of their bodily needs. They can get very stuck in their drive, their ambition, their hunger to achieve and accomplish things. And in the process, they can lose touch with, did I remember to have a drink of water today? They can struggle to prioritize things like sleep. And so that a relentless drive can backfire physically for them sometimes. As intuitives, they can feel, NJs, there's not a whole lot of them in the world. They can struggle to find other people to share their more intuitive ideas with. Like other NJs, they can struggle with that early existential crisis, have those really big picture questions, and they often struggle with, what's the point of everything? Why am I even here? How did we get here? Many ENTJs that I've spoken with have left their childhood faiths and have disconnected from family over that. Like they argued and debated the faiths that they grew up with, and then ended up creating a rift in their families because of that. I'm not saying that all ENTJs are atheists or anything like that. There's plenty of ENTJs I know who are really religious. My dad's a really religious ENTJ. But they tend to question what society says. So if they grow up in a home and it's like, well, we all believe this, so you should too, they're not naturally going to take to that. Just like other thinking types, they need to know it for themselves. They need to question it. And because they're so interested in patterns and the things that are unseen and this intuitive understanding of life and what it means, they're naturally going to kind of question spiritual teachings and things like that, sort of as a way of exploring it. But that can definitely be taken the wrong way by parents sometimes. For ESTJs, they struggle more with things like unpredictability or a lack of stability in the home. ESTJs really need life at home to feel consistent, to have a steady routine, to know what's going to happen and what to expect. So if life is inconsistent or rules are inconsistent or everything's changing all the time, that's going to be really hard for them as children. New routines, new teachers, moving house, that can be really overwhelming. Often they can get stuck in hyper responsible mode, where they take on a whole bunch of the tasks and projects and responsibilities around the house and feel like maybe they're taken for granted of in that way. ETJs tend to show they care by being really productive people. And sometimes that's not seen as the, obvious way to show care. It's not the, touchy-feely, super empathetic way, but they tend to take on a lot of responsibility to show they care, and they tend to work really hard to show they care, even as children. Excuse me. And sometimes it's frustrating for them because people aren't seeing the heart behind it. They're just seeing, wow, these people are really busy. They're too focused on tasks, but they're not seeing that some of what's going on there is they actually want to prove that they care to others, or they're putting a lot of their heart into that. And there's a comment here from Kale. It says, I think my mom is an ESTJ. She has stories about her childhood where she couldn't wait to drive and work since she was so restricted growing up. And yeah, usually ETJs are anxious to get out there and have independence and get things done without the roadblock of age stopping them. All right, so now we have EFJs. I was actually thinking that was the last one, but I am like...
One more to go. One more to go.
So let me know if you're here and you're an ENFJ or an ESFJ. Be sure to leave a comment. Let us know that you're here. So as dominant extroverted feeling types, ENFJs and ESFJs are focused on harmony, connection, all those interpersonal dynamics. They're really good at reading people's emotions, reading the room, prioritizing other people's needs, and taking care of the people that they care about. There's a lot of emotional understanding generally with EFJs. These are the biggest struggles they mentioned having as children. Conflict and disapproval is majorly stressful for them. They feed off of emotions and they absorb emotions in the atmosphere like a sponge. So if there are angry emotions, uncomfortable emotions, conflict, things like that, they tend to take it on themselves and they tend to see it as their responsibility to have to fix it. And of course, as a child, you shouldn't have that weighing on you. You shouldn't go into every room feeling like everyone's feelings are your responsibility. You can imagine a lot of the ways that can show up in a negative way. If anyone's upset with them, they can feel really anxious. They'll be lying awake in bed going, how can I help that person to feel better? And how can I help that person to feel better? And unless everyone's getting along, they can feel a lot of stress in their lives. Daniel, you have some EFJs in your life. Do you have any stories about them in childhood? Because I know you have some in your family.
Yeah, I'm trying to like think the best way to put this. Like, I think one of the things that, like you were saying, is they do feed off of that emotional kind of resonance of whatever's around them. And so it's very easy. I think people overlook how quickly and easily children can pick up on negative emotions and negative situations, even if they don't understand them or understand why they're there. I think it's very, very easy for EFJs, because they're especially tuned into that, to pick up on those things. And if they're not in a position to have any kind of control over it, it just kind of eats at them and leaves them feeling like a little bit powerless, but also anxious at the same time. So it's almost a perfect storm of just kind of a downward spiral for them, to not being able to do anything about it, but that negative space still being there. And so I think like one of the best things that they could have is somebody who can, even if there's nothing they can do about it, sit down and kind of talk them through it as best as you can for that child to kind of explain, hey, it's okay. Kind of like we do with our son. Listen, this situation. I understand it sucks. It's negative. It's bad. We don't like this, but this isn't your responsibility. You don't have to worry about this. And they need that kind of clear emotional boundary to be upheld for them, to help them to be, feel safe and secure in that situation.
Yeah, learning boundaries is really important for EFJs. They tend to have very thin boundaries between their emotions and other people's, and sometimes they can get other people's emotions mixed up for their own. And it's hard for them to have their own independent feelings because they're kind of absorbing so much from the atmosphere around them. So even though they're extroverts, it's really important that they have some good solo recharge time to get in touch with themselves. Things like journaling, that can be really helpful for them. A lot of EFJs, especially ENFJs, like creative self-expression, like art therapy is super helpful. Or learning how to write poems is a way of channeling their own feelings and really getting in touch with them instead of always feeling like they're kind of mixed up with other people's feelings. And then Doug had a question. He said, does childhood trauma not make us super sensitive, absorb emotions and environment, and then feel responsible to fix it? Yes, I would say that's true. Childhood trauma tends to cause people to feel like they need to mediate the emotional environment. And that's kind of regardless of personality type. How the different types are going to respond to childhood trauma will vary. But for the most part, even thinking children, if they're in a really traumatic childhood situation, they will feel like, okay, I need to figure out a way to manage people's emotions, because when the emotions are out of control, then that's dangerous. Someone could get hurt. So some people struggle when it comes to finding their personality type if they've had a traumatic childhood, because they may feel like, oh, I read people's emotions really well, but it's not necessarily related to a feeling preference. It could be that they just learned that they had to. Otherwise, they might not be safe. So definitely something to keep in mind. I'd like to do a stream at some point on childhood trauma and the types, but I would need to do that would be way deeper, and I feel like I couldn't get into all 16 types, because you'd have to go too deep to make that fit in 2 hours.
It's like a 3-part series right there.
But thank you for asking that, Doug, because that's a really good question. Because some people might think, oh, only EFJ types do that. But all the types can do that if they're in a traumatic, especially an emotionally traumatic situation growing up as children. But for EFJs, even if their life is somewhat normal and somewhat healthy, if they're dealing with any kind of conflict, whether it's a friend at school, a parent, a sibling, then that can, to them, what another type might brush off is, oh, that person's not happy, but that's a different person and I'm over here. They might be getting mixed up with that. It's all connected to them. The emotions are all kind of like glue sticking to them. So learning to have healthy boundaries, learning some mindfulness techniques so that they can learn to kind of let go some of those gluey, sticky emotions that other people are attaching to them, can be really helpful. A lot of times, if you imagine little EFJs, they go to school or they come home and people just kind of put their feelings. If you imagine them with just like sticking little sticky notes or sticking little pins of just emotions all over them, they get home and they're just like covered in them. That's how I picture it. Learning to be able to let some of that go, to say to themselves, I am responsible for my emotions. They are responsible for theirs. And, there's a lot of great meditations. I'm a huge fan of children's meditations. I have a whole book of meditation games for kids. I haven't written it. I just bought it. Not that good. But if you can find some like that for helping a young EFJ kind of learn to let go those negative, anxious, emotional feelings that they've picked up from other people, that's a huge step for them. Some of the distinct struggles that they can deal with related to the N or S preference. For ENFJs, these are they're big picture people. They love to, get into the deeper philosophical subjects in life. So again, those early existential crises, those big questions that adults don't really expect kids to ask, can be a real challenge. Like maybe they come up to their parent and they're like, well, where is where is grandpa now that he's died? Like, I don't really believe in this. What's going to happen to him? And where's the dog that passed away, or things like that? They might really want to get into that kind of thing. And oftentimes their questions are seen as odd, or they're brushed aside. And so that can be a real challenge for them. Finding people who want to talk about these more abstract musings can be a challenge for them. They can deal with some existential fears about the future. They have a sense like, oh yeah, we are all going to die, or the kind of a sense of the shortness of life. Every NJ I know thinks about death a lot. It's just like a thing that we do. I was at a personality hacker conference and I was walking around with Denzel Mensa, who's an ENFJ, who also has a YouTube channel, and then another INTJ and an INFJ. We were all talking about how we just constantly have death on our mind. And as a child, it can feel, as much as we just NJs naturally gravitate to those kinds of thoughts, it can still feel really overwhelming, especially if you don't have someone in your life, a parent in your life, who's okay with talking about some of those scarier subjects. For ESFJs, there's any kind of home life where it's unstable, where you don't have the security of a routine, that can feel super challenging. A lot of SJs worry when, if you're in a home where the parents are talking a lot about financial struggles, or the parents are fighting and there's a threat of divorce, things that could disrupt the stability are super scary for SJ types. Parents who are undependable, who don't show up when they say they will, who don't follow through on their word, that's super, super scary. So these are some things that for SJs, there's a strong need for stability. And but sometimes they can also be so rule-oriented and so focused on other people's expectations, they lose sight of what they want or what they agree with, and they just find themselves kind of following the rules. And often when they get to be teenagers, they're like, what do I even stand for? What do I even truly believe for myself? I spent so much time trying to make everyone else happy and trying to follow the rules and be the good kid, but what do I actually want for me? And so sometimes that's a struggle for them to really figure out when they're young. And Doug, thank you so much for this comment, because it's so important. Mm-hmm. Rule number 1, accept kids' open expressions and don't label them as weird. Absolutely. And you know what? Sometimes we say that, well, only NJs are the kids, or only INFPs are the kids that get labeled weird. I will say that I have literally talked to all 16 types so many times, and everyone has these memories of being a kid and feeling misunderstood or weird or not good enough. And so being open, honest, asking forgiveness. I think one of the biggest things as a parent that anyone can do is to admit mistakes and ask for forgiveness. It's just not something that was done 20, 30 years ago very often. And now it's something that I think is so important for all of us. I mean, I have to do it. Sometimes it's so humbling, but I mean, I have to do it too. Like, if I raise my voice at my kids and it wasn't fair for me to do that, being able to be honest about our mistakes, own up to them, apologize, and also notice the things that light your child, like notice the things that inspire your children, encourage those things, notice the things that, you have to be kind of, it's easy to notice all the red flags, all the things that are wrong, because those things are just like, oh wait, I have to stop that because it's dangerous. But noticing, being on the lookout for good behavior, for anything positive, that's harder to do. And as humans, we're just kind of wired to respond to threats and to aberrations or things that are wrong, or problems that need to be fixed. But if you can kind of wire yourself to look out for your children's positive qualities, for the things they're doing right, for the little details that you might overlook, that they things that they're doing to help others, to be creative, whatever it is, really show them that you appreciate that, give them those specific compliments. All right, so there's my 2-hour monologue on type and childhood struggles. If you stuck with us through that, I really appreciate it. I know there were so many technical issues on this particular stream, so I appreciate your patience with that. I know it was a little crazy there for a little bit. We weren't sure if we were going to even be able to make it happen. So thank you for being a part of this with us. We will be here next week as well. We don't have the topic figured out yet, but we'll let you know. And we hope to see you all again next week. That would be amazing to have you there. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Kate, Karen, Kale, all of you. I really appreciate it. Melissa, thanks for being part of this. And Daniel, did you have anything you wanted to say before we sign off?
Well, I was just thinking about what Doug had said there about accept kids' open expressions and don't label them as weird. And it reminded me of Ted Lasso, actually, the show Ted Lasso. But he quotes Walt Whitman where he says, be curious, not judgmental. And I think that's like some really quality advice. And it goes not just for kids, but for anybody, any person, any personality type. If we can realize that everyone is an individual and different, and we can try to be curious about what makes them operate the way they are, it would just make everything better and easier and with more love and understanding, which I think would be amazing. So that's it. That's my parting words.
Thank you, Daniel. And I also wanted to say, if any of you are wanting help figuring out your personality type, or you're wanting help understanding your cognitive functions or your shadow functions, or getting a little deeper into type, you can also book a session with me on my website at psychologyjunkie.com. I would love to have a one-on-one session with you, hopefully where the Zoom does not block out like today, this stream. So a one-on-one session with you where we can talk about getting to know yourself better and getting clear on your personality type, or if there's something that's just been confusing to you about it, like you're like, I don't understand how I use tertiary NE or whatever it is, you want to talk about your type in depth, then I would love to have a session with you. We've also made many years ago, I think this was 2018, we made a what's the word? Oh my gosh. This is what happens when an INTJ has been talking too long. They start forgetting their own language. We made a course. That's what it was. Course is the word. Parenting by Personality, where we talk about the different personality types as children. There's information in there on how to type your children and what they need in terms of homework, or how they deal with stress differently, how you can take care of yourself based on your own personality as a parent. So it's this huge set with lots of really great stuff. It's got books for all the types. It's got lots of printable stuff, and it's got a bunch of different videos to help you get into all the types. So if you are interested in that, you can also check out that Parenting by Personality course on my website. But again, thank you so much to everyone for being here. Really appreciate your comments. I agree with Randall. Doug, you had some really great thoughts, and I really appreciate having you here. Karen, it's great to have an ESFP here. And Karen, I just see your comment here. She said, I have to say, I live in Chicago, and the situation here has been very difficult. Spending this evening with you all has been really powerful and helping me feel better. Hashtag self-care. Thank you. Karen, I appreciate that so much. I know things in Chicago are pretty crazy right now, and so I can only imagine. And I'm glad that you're here with us. Come back next week. Believe me, like there are so few ESFPs who are sharing their voices about type. And your voice is really valuable. Your comments, your anecdotes, the stories that you share mean a lot. So thank you for being here and for sharing that with us, and for being able to help create this community with us. I know sometimes, like during this stream, it was a little messy tonight. Like I will admit, I honestly was a little bit flustered throughout today's talk. I'm not going to lie, just because we got off to such a bumpy start. And so there were times where I was like, oh my gosh, what was I supposed to say here? But this is kind of what I want, is to create a real community of real people, to where like we know each other, and you'll know sometimes Susan is going to be flustered because things didn't go right. And but that's okay, because we're just all connecting. And so thank you for being part of this community with us. Thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts. And I'm excited to see you all next week. I hope you'll be here.
Absolutely.
So thanks to everyone. Thank you, Doug, John, Karen, Amy, Kate. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all next week. You guys have a great night, okay? Bye, everybody.
Bye.